welcome you into the Lootpress studios. You're watching the Lootpress Sports Lowdown. I'm your host, Tyler Jackson, sports editor at Lootpress, joined as always by sports writer for Lootpress, Rusty Udi. Rusty, how are you doing today?
Doing good. Postseason's hot and heavy right now for the fall.
Yeah, it's funny because I think we talked about it last week, but we kind of got thrown right into like that 40-degree weather sort of night. Then on Friday, it was actually pretty decent. We got kind of low 60s, high 50s. It felt really good to kind of get the in-between for once.
It corrected itself on Saturday for the soccer. It was quite cold.
Yeah. Yeah, but we got a great slate on for the show today. First thing I kind of want to start with is we opened last week talking about the classification proposals that had come out, and then the SSAC Board of Control elected to pass the one about Spring Valley, and we had talked about that one specifically because it had so much data and kind of examples of where different things would go, and just kind of recap what that looks like. Spring Valley proposed that the students that received direct certified services, which were basically if you're eligible or you received free or reduced lunch, count as half a student towards enrollment, and then their enrollment cutoffs, like I think 900 plus, you're in Quad A, and then you kind of sift through them from there. And that one ended up passing. It was actually a bit of a closer vote. I think it won by about 10 votes or so it was pretty contested. And then the other proposal that passed was they moved the reclassification process from every 4 years to every 2 years. I like Spring Valley's thing. Obviously, there's some pushback on it. There's been some mentions of the 3/5 sort of thing that was dealt with back when voting rights with African Americans and things like that, and sort of discrimination there. And I kind of want to start off though with the move to every 2 to 4 years. I talked to some administrators that were around last time that it was, because it used to be that they did reclassify every 2 years. Right. And some of the veteran administrators were like, it was a disaster. There's a lot of work. For the SSAC, they're spending basically 3 to 4 months, doing reclassifications every 2 years, which it's fine. It's part of their job. But it just seems like from a scheduling standpoint, just to kind of point it out for, whenever there's a reclassification process like there was last year, the first year for football, teams get a classification waiver. You're supposed to have at least 6 schools on your schedule. So if you're Shady Spring, you're supposed to have 6 schools any given year that are in AAA. Well, that first year you get a waiver because of the way things, they change from year to year. So you get that first year to get it sorted out. Then the next 3 years, you're supposed to have 6 AAA teams on your schedule. So now your process is you get that first year waiver. In the second year, you're trying to make sure that you have enough teams in your classification on your schedule. And then the next classification comes out and you're back in the same boat again. And it affects your playoff ratings points and things like that. And it's not necessarily a big issue when it comes to basketball and other sports like that, but specifically for football, it is. And just all the administrators that I've kind of talked to from the old guard that were around have said, we don't expect that it'll stick around for too much longer. They'll realize. And it was proposed because of classification influxes. They change so often, but it just seems like it's going to be so much more of a headache that before long they'll be back to 4 years.
Yeah, it's just going to make football really tough. And, if they don't make some adjustments as far as those requirements of how many schools you have to play in class and, really points for even playing lower class. If they don't do some fixes on that, it's just going to be kind of a really big mess. And we're already seeing that right now. We got several schools or a few schools that are kind of in that boat a little bit. They scheduled 4A schools or 2A schools, and then they wound up dropping, and then now their points are getting rattled because of it. So, I think that's going to be really hard. Unless if you do make those waivers, then they can make your football schedules a little longer into the future. So there's definitely like I've said before, I don't get too worried about this stuff because there's so many changes that I'm not even sure we're done with the changes as far as this year's gone yet. So it just too many changes right now.
Yeah, so specifically with the Spring Valley vote, it does kind of seem like it may not pass because it goes through the public comment period, and then the State Board of Education will vote on it in December. Part of the issue comes from Quad A's. There could be 16 in all sports. Originally for football, when I talked to the SSAC in 2023 at the state championships at the Super 6, the idea was to make Quad A smaller for football specifically because the data supports, more bodies, fewer injuries, things like that. And that was what went to the board review decision back in August whenever they granted these appeals to move these schools down. It was an injury thing. So it wasn't meant to be spread across all classes. But with Spring Valley's proposal that passed, it now is.
Right.
I reached out to Woodrow to kind of get their opinion of it, and Ryan Stafford told me, the principal there, he said, I haven't really had a chance to go too deep into the data. Once I do, I'll get back to you. I think just locally for Beckley, I don't think it impacts them too much for these other sports, just because they've been in the MSAC. They've always played Huntington. They've always played GW and all these other teams. And you don't have these in-class requirements like you do for football and softball.
Right.
And truthfully, they're probably getting more competitive games when they play Shady as opposed to traveling up to Parkersburg or all these other schools. Basketball in this area has historically been stronger than what it is in other parts of the state. So I don't think it really impacts them too much, but I am kind of curious what their opinion is once they go through all that data. But just looking at it and how it impacts our area, I think it favors our area when you do like the half student, because I looked at it. Riverview is, and I went to Riverview, so I'm very well aware of their socioeconomic situation. They are the biggest single A school under that proposal that Spring Valley presented. And they have a 75% needy rate. Like that's basically and that matches the area. McDowell County is a much poorer county. I think that might be the biggest in the state. And you look over, I think Bluefield's at 65%. And I kind of asked my wife about it because she is a CIS coordinator at Bluefield Primary. And there is a bunch of different factors that go into it. And somebody had emailed me earlier today, I believe it was actually Williamstown's football coach, kind of voicing his concerns with it. And there is some a social pressure where some people don't necessarily apply for these waivers, not waivers, but they kind of skews the needy data. And with your work with the state, you were an investigator for years. Do you have any kind of opinion or kind of insight on how those things go?
Well, there's always fudging.
Yeah.
So, they're trying to make it work for whatever's best for them, but I just felt like that specifically in our area, a lot of single A teams were bumped to double A, and that was going to be really tough on those things. But there definitely is a socioeconomic factor involved in this. Whether you never want to try to make anybody look bad or anything like that, but the facts are the facts, and that does impact what they can do as far as extracurricular stuff and things like that. So I kind of do get that a little bit, but I don't know. I just the proposal to me just seemed to really knock a lot of our teams up into double A. And, the teams we've already seen, Midland Trail in double A, how they fared. And they're, in my opinion, clearly a single A school and would be able to compete in single A. The Greenbrier West, to move them up to double A, there was a time where they were a double A school. They were a big school. But now I don't think they can compete in double A, at this level now. So, I think teams like that are really going to be hurt, pretty drastically by it. And I don't know. We'll just see how it works out. But I just don't think it's going to fly.
Yeah, and I know some of them kind of presented the thing of double A specifically, because again, I assume it was Williamstown's head coach because it came from Chris Beck and he's who coaches them. They brought up kind of the enrollment percentage discrepancy. Like I think the smallest double A is Wheeling Central at 300, and that's because they don't have a percent needy. They're 0% private school, which makes sense. And I think the biggest school in double A under this format is Chapmanville with 666 kids. Yeah. So they're basically like, you have over 50% enrollment discrepancy between the bottom school and the top school, which is an interesting point. To me, you bring up Midland Trail and some of those schools. It is a little bit difficult, but I look at some of our other schools, Greenbrier East, Princeton, and some people look at Bluefield. I think Bluefield kind of gets judged harshly just because of the athletic success that they have. But you look at 65% is a massive percentage immediate. Like that is almost, that's probably a bottom 10% or high 10% of most needy schools in the area. So it is pretty an underprivileged area when you look at it from that perspective. But I don't think, particularly with Bluefield, because I know that school in particular is a point of contention with all the classifications, because a lot of people think just because of the success that they have, they have a little bit over 600 kids, that they don't belong in double A. And then you kind of look at it from that aspect, and okay, maybe it makes a little bit more sense. But double A does seem to be the most contentious one, because there are some smaller schools there in the bottom. They're like, hey, we don't belong in double A. And then,
well, I think we see that this year. If we took Midland Trail against Independence, we took Greenbrier West against Independence. I'm just not sure how, I don't think that would work out very well, and not picking on Independence, but we feel like they are a AA school. And, that if that's the factor, then see, we do have a gap there. And that's the thing that's hard with numbers is it's really hard to differentiate. With our eye, we can kind of see, okay, these schools year in and year out can't compete at that level, but they can compete at the other level. And that's not giving anybody a break. That's just the way the schools are. That's the way it's set up in West Virginia. So, I don't know. It's just really hard to put it on quantify it with numbers. But evidently that's really what people want it to be. So, there's going to be a lot of people, I think, going to not like it once it's all said and done.
Yeah, and then you also have to get to the point of when it gets to the State Board of Education's board review. I know that they'll vote if they vote to pass it, but you end up in the same boat where it's like it was with what happened with August, where you have a bunch of schools that are
and we probably will.
I know Midland Trail is not very happy about being in AA, and Oak Hill was one of the schools that successfully got an appeal and was able to win. So if you're Midland Trail, you might be already firing it up. And honestly, what the appeal process has done is it's enabled a lot of schools to be able to whine. And if they don't like where they're at, we can go on down, and not saying that they're wrong. There are clearly some appeals, and that should have been heard, and that probably should have been won, and that would have avoided this process altogether. But it's the appeal process has been abused, and now I think I heard that some of the volleyball teams that were in that their football teams dropped down a class have gone to court, and they've gotten injunctions. I think I'm not sure if it's St. Mary's for sure. But one of them, I believe, just got an injunction to drop down from AA to single A before postseason starts. So I'm
surprised that hasn't happened before. I kind of said that when this all went down, that we would have those kind of problems. Now, whether it's right or wrong, that's a different issue. But I felt like there would be some schools that were just going to get fired up and say, wait a minute, how the boys are playing at this level, but the girls are playing at this level, vice versa. I don't know. I just thought that was going to be a problem, but it really hasn't been as much a problem as I thought it was going to be, to be honest.
I think a lot of people are just waiting to tee it up. One other thing that I was told is that the appeals for the ratings points, because a lot of teams are unhappy because those teams in August dropped down, that they're not getting the same points. Previously, for example, Nicholas County was AAA. If you beat Nicholas County, you'd have got AAA points. Now, if you schedule them, you're only getting AA points where they drop down. Same for Independence. And a couple teams already submitted appeals. They were heard. I've been told that the letters haven't gone out yet on any decisions. So we'll see what happens there. But I can't imagine them granting those appeals and not doing it across the board. And this is just me saying it. If they were going to do it, I think they would have gotten ahead of it and done it whenever they dropped everyone down. So there's another thing you have, and I've already had some coaches, they're going to try to probably take it, some coaches have expressed concern to me about, hey, like we scheduled such and such with the expectation, and now, this might cost us a playoff spot. And, I get that. It's just kind of the lay of the land, but it seems like people are probably gearing up to take this to court. So what happens to the postseason?
Because there's been success, like you said.
Yeah.
Because there has been success. It's like, hey, well, we're going to try it. So, and, I don't really blame them for it. I would too. You're always trying to do what's best for your kids, in your program. So, but it's a mess. That's just the biggest thing. It's just a mess.
Yeah, it's like I said, I really do kind of like Nitro's proposal to Nitro Martinsburg, where they were just like, get rid of the appeal process. Let's just throw that in. And obviously, those appeals weren't adopted, but yeah, I don't think we've heard the last of this, and I wouldn't be surprised if that second week in November there are a ton of administrators in court. Especially when the final playoff ratings come out, and they're like, oh, well, we missed the playoffs because of this, or we didn't get a home game because of that. And then we were just sitting here waiting from Monday or Saturday whenever they come out.
What if they get approved halfway through the playoffs?
Yeah. And then you're kind of in that situation.
Go back and replay.
Yeah,
it's just a mess.
The only time I can recall something like that happening is I think South Charleston, I think it was like 2009 or so, they had a couple kids ejected at the end of a quarterfinal playoff game, and they went and played against Brooke with those kids, and they went and got like a temporary restraining order, and they ended up losing. So they beat Brooke, but because of the appeal process, the SSC AC won in court. So the state championship game for AAA was pushed back a week from the rest of them. South Charleston had to forfeit that semifinal win, and Brooke got to go on to the state championship game, which they ended up losing anyways.
Right.
But yeah, that's I mean, we could end up in that where the Super Six and things like that get pushed back.
I mean, everything's kind of out the window right now. I mean, who knows what's going to happen?
Yeah, it's kind of just a wait and see. We're just all just waiting for it. So I
just hated it like at the beginning of the season. It was just like right at the very beginning. It's all, okay, we're going to change everything now.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we should have had all this ironed out prior to the season, but we don't, and so here we are.
Yeah, the SSAC's lawyer, whoever he is he's racking up.
Exactly. Working a lot of overtime.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we're going to go ahead and get into the Week 9 slate of games, kind of recap what we covered. Kind of crazy to feel like we're already in Week 9. It feels like just yesterday we were previewing everything.
Yeah.
I do want to start with the game that you were at in Montcalm Meadow Bridge. Before we get on to this, I do want to preface, I got the message that receiver Tristan Klein, who was leading the area in a lot of receiving metrics, is out for the season. He got hurt in that game.
He looked bad.
Yeah, that's really tough. We talked about Montcalm's offense. I think at the point that he went down in that game, they were only down by 2 points or so, and then.
Actually, I thought it was just a touchdown at that point. It was real early in the game, and but I could tell when they took him off that it didn't look like he was coming back the way he went off the field, and then they wound up getting it back within 2 points at one stretch. But I mean, you can't say it doesn't affect the game. I thought maybe Coach Havens said it right. We've got guys that need to step up. But we all also know you lose a guy of that caliber. He's a guy of that caliber for a reason.
Yeah, and it's Montcalm. You don't have a ton of extra bodies coming out there, especially that kind of talent. Yeah.
So, but I mean, I credit to Meadow Bridge in that regard because they threw some new wrinkles at them on defense. Adam said basically caught them off guard a little bit. They had some wrinkles that they had not seen on film, weren't fully prepared for because they didn't expect them. And, they basically dared them to run the football and drop guys in coverage and made it really tough. I mean, they couldn't really throw the ball down the field much. It was a lot of, side-to-side passing and things like that. Really had no answers, and when they did bring some pressure, they really had nowhere to throw it. So some passes were rushed, a couple interceptions, a couple key interceptions at times. And, the Montcalm offense, we thought was – it is prolific, and don't get me wrong when I'm saying it. We thought we was going to see a ton of, even Coach Reichert said, he figured it was going to be a back-and-forth score-for-score game and that they needed to score, every time they had the ball. But they really just shut the door on them, and they just really had no answers. Tried to run it some, but, that was totally ineffective. And then, of course, Meadow Bridge with the runaway freight train, with Caden Sims, he looked really good. And, Adam, the quote he had was, he looks really good on film. He looks even better in real life. So.
And that's the thing. They saw him last year. He rushed for 200 yards on him last year. Right. So they know how good he is. Yeah. And, you put that part in your story where they gave him looks they hadn't seen. And it kind of didn't surprise me from that standpoint just because Meadow Bridge – you go back 2 or 3 years ago, they were a spread team.
Exactly.
They used to execute those concepts. They know what it takes to stop them. It's not like, they play a lot of small single-A ball, so you don't see a lot of what Montcalm was doing. But they have familiarity with it. They used to run those different things. It's not really a surprise for them, so they can game plan against it.
Yeah, that's what Coach Reichert said. He's like, we were familiar with the areas that he would need to go to, and he would try to throw to, and they basically, eliminated those areas the best they could and made them go to other places. And, when you're really kind of not expecting that, and you're in a situation where pressure is bearing down on you, you're just kind of trying to look and find other places. And it showed a couple times. They really baffled Jalen. I mean, he was really frustrated at times, flustered at times, and a couple of the interceptions were almost just hope. He threw them into areas he was hoping somebody was there, but unfortunately, some couple of Meadow Bridge kids was who was there. So, they just had no offense, to speak of. I mean, basically one decent drive, and then, the second score was basically on a fumble that was just, basically outside the red zone. They scored on that. So, a lot of credit to Meadow Bridge for a really good game plan, and I felt like, talking to Caden and talking to Coach Riker, they, even though they thought it was going to be a tough game, they thought it was a game they were going to win, and they played like it.
Yeah, Caden was pretty fired up. I love the quote that he gave you.
Yeah.
A lot of people talked about this as a rivalry, and he kind of took that disrespectful way.
Yeah. And he has friends, he has buddies
Yeah.
at Montcalm. He said, I wasn't being mean to him. He's like, I just didn't think it was a rivalry game. He felt like they were going to win, and he played like it. And even a sidekick to that was that he only practiced one day last week. He was sick. He had upper respiratory issue. I think one of their linemen for sure, center, he only practiced one day. So they did have some issues there, and he was a little concerned defensively because they didn't have guys, there all week, where they were doing some new stuff, some stuff they weren't used to doing, how they would pick up on it, because there's a lot of mental things you had to do involved in that defensive scheme, and they played it to a T.
Absolutely, and it's a good win for Meadow Bridge. Caden Sims close to 1,800 yards, and that's with one of their wins coming via forfeit. So, yeah.
That's a shame because you factor in another 300-yard game, which you probably would have gained at least 300 that night. That's put him over 2,000 already, and I think I don't know what the school record is. It's probably about 2,500.
I think it's 2,500 or so.
So, he'd be pushing that with 2 more games to go.
Yeah, 2 more regular season games, and to get in the playoffs, another opportunity there as well.
Exactly.
I want to move on to the game that I covered, and that was Princeton at Independence. This was the return of Brad Mosser and Markel Lowe. Princeton was able to gut one out against Beckley the week before. Got this one off to a fast start. Markel Lowe returns the opening kick, 74 yards for a touchdown. And then things really slowed from there. Independence, I thought, put in a great game plan. They were without their starting 2 tackles, and the way it's looking right now, they don't know when they'll get them back, or even if they'll get them back this year, just because of how banged up they are. They're on the bye this coming week. But they did a good job. They moved the pocket. They were able to get short passes, do different things to move the ball downfield. The issue that they ran into is they just struggled once they got into the red zone. Once the field condenses, it's a little bit harder.
Right.
And, there was some just execution. It was a little hard. They had some good plays. There was a trick play they ran on their second red zone trip. It was a 4th down, and it just fell incomplete. It was open. They just couldn't connect on it. And then in the third quarter, they were held out of on a quarterback sneak. Referees ruled them out. I think there's a video angle that shows that they probably got in, but they were able to block a punt. Well, the punt goes off the back of a Princeton player, and they still score on their next drive from 9 yards out.
Yeah.
But to me, kind of the story of this was just how Princeton was able to find its answers using different things. And Markel Lowe was essentially the game changer for them. And that's what makes Princeton so difficult to defend and play against. Independence, I felt like did almost everything right except for capitalizing on those red zone opportunities in the first half, and still went into the halftime break down 21-3, and it didn't really even feel like Princeton was dominating that game or anything like that. They just hit on 2 big plays and scored on offense, and that's just kind of when you're an Independence playing a Princeton team like that, you got to capitalize on your opportunities. But a lot of credit to Independence because they really competed, and I thought we ended up getting the blowout, but we didn't get it the way that I thought we would. I thought that it might get ugly from the start, and it just never got that way. It just kind of all poured on a little bit late. It was still, I think, a 2 or 3 score game there going into the 4th quarter. But if you're Independence, you probably feel good about what you're able to do against a team of that caliber because, as we've talked about, it doesn't matter who they play in AA. They're not going to see a team that good. But really, really, really gutty performance for Independence.
Yeah, the only concerning thing is the fact that, you lose 1 tackle, it's concerning. Losing 2, it's even more concerning. So, that's the only concern going forward. But, yeah, that was a really good performance, against a team that, we pretty felt like was going to take command right from the beginning. So, Princeton just has so many weapons. They hit you from so many different directions that, it's like a ticking time bomb. You're just waiting for it to explode. And finally they do hit a few things, and when they get going, they're just almost really hard to stop after that. So, you never want to take a loss. All losses are bad losses, but, it was an impressive performance. Independence had impressive performances against Princeton and Oak Hill, and, when you watch the Oak Hill game, they very well could have won that game, and, maybe you can even say should have won that game. So, they played really well, and they're going to be a handful in the playoffs. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And they, I think the schedule's aided them so much as it currently stands when the ratings come out. Again, we're recording on Monday. They'll be out on Tuesday. I think as it appears, Independence just drops down from 4 to 5.
Yep.
And we'll talk about more of how the AA ratings and how, when you schedule tough, it's aiding you, from the health standpoint, it's hurting a little bit. But these guys are in position to host a playoff game and maybe 2, depending on how things shake out. I think getting 2 is going to be tough because I'm not sure they'll be able to get the 4 seed with how things are at their final home games.
Probably have to have some help.
I think so, too. The final games against Summers County and, some of those teams are going to get them wins. But, yeah, they're in a good spot. For Princeton, I think this is probably a good game for them to have too. I thought in the Independence, and John Lilley talked about it, they gave Princeton different looks. Every time they snapped the ball, it was a different defensive look almost every play. And I thought it kind of confused some of Princeton's protection issues. When your offensive line, the thing you're taught is take away the shortest path to the quarterback. So it's up the middle. If you have to let a free edge rusher go, you protect the middle. And one thing that was happening is Independence likes to do this, they were getting pressure up the middle. They were getting, a blitzer was coming free and getting to Barker and pressuring him and getting him off of the spot or even getting to him at different points. So if you're Princeton, you kind of get to see those different looks, and it's like, okay, now we need to adjust to these moving forward. What can we do in protection to sort these different things out? Because so much of what they do is contingent on that.
Yep.
And I know another thing that Princeton wanted to see, and I think they're happy to see, was that Independence did use more of the sprint out and move the pocket a little bit more against them because Parkersburg South does that as well.
Right.
And they want to be prepared for that game because that Parkersburg South game in the final week of the season, you win that one, you're hosting throughout the playoffs, provided you also beat Greenbrier East this week. So, if there's something to be discouraged about with Princeton as far as the start goes a little bit and how they, responded to certain situations from a schematic standpoint.
Right.
But it's a good thing to kind of put those things on film and so you can shore those issues up. You don't want to get into the semifinals or quarterfinals and you're seeing a look for the first time and it's like, okay, now we have to adjust within the next 3 or 4 plays or find something in this half before this thing gets out of control.
Yeah, you kind of wonder too if Princeton maybe, I don't know if say looking ahead, but kind of feeling like they were to handle this game without any trouble. And sometimes you get in a battle and somebody bloodies your nose. You get a little well, wait a minute here. We gotta step up. So credit to them. They handled it relatively well and got the win. But just seeing all the different looks, that's a huge help going forward.
And then that's Independence is a very veteran defensive staff. Like I said, they put together a great game plan. The score probably looks a little bit differently if they can capitalize on those red zone possessions. But at the same time, Princeton does a good job of holding. I talked about it. I can think of about 4 or 5 goal line stands Princeton's made over Keith Taylor's tenure that have been big swings that have won them playoff games.
Exactly.
They won a quarterfinal game in the semifinal game last year because they made goal line stands at the 1 or inside the 10. So, it's kind of in their DNA. Just want to quickly run through a couple games. Well, talk a little bit about this one. Oak Hill at Bluefield. Oak Hill wins 21-0. I got a chance to watch the first half of this game earlier today, and I'd written about it a little bit. Oak Hill's offensive struggles continue. We've hit on it a little bit more. I do want to start with the positives, though. Defensively, I thought they did a really good job of making Simpson uncomfortable in the pocket. Mechanically, he's a very nuanced quarterback, especially for a freshman. But he's not the most fleet of foot, so they took away some of his rush lanes to escape out of the pocket. He wasn't able to escape out, laterally. If he did, he'd have to step up. And they kind of, if he's stepping up or if he's trying to escape out the front of the pocket, you feel like your linebackers and your players are quick enough to rally up and get him. Whereas opposed to if he escapes out sideways, now he can reset, he can scan the field and hit different things. But Oak Hill's offensive line, they brought a lot of pressure and to me, Bluefield had to stay in a lot of 7-man protections. So when you're doing that, now you have 8 guys back, including the quarterback, so you only have 3 routes out there. Yeah. And Oak Hill, if they're only bringing 5, you're basically, okay, we have 3 guys that have to find open holes against 6 different defenders, and it's just not favorable, and a lot of it's downfield shots. So just another clinic defensive effort from Oak Hill. Offensively, kind of what stood out to me, I think Oak Hill is more of an execution issue. I think they're leaving plays out there. I looked at some, I thought Devin Richardson played really well, but there was basically a slot fade where they faked the screen and then, the receiver's running open and it kind of hangs in the air, so Carson Treadway has to wait for it. And then they face a 3rd and 20. and they get the ball, he delivers a good ball, it looks like, to receiver right at the goal line. You can't really tell from the camera angle whether or not it went off his hands or if it was too high, but there's the opportunity there to get all that back and maybe score. And there's another play where, Richardson hits the receiver deep for about a 40-yard gain, and it leads him a little bit too far to the sideline, so he can't keep running, and then he probably scores a touchdown there. Another little bit of just a high pass. So I think the takeaway for me, at least from this game for Oak Hill's offense, the struggle kind of came from just leaving plays out there. And it's tough to do that because they do a good job of controlling the ball and running the clock and different things like that. But that was kind of, I think, from my early takeaway from, and I'm trying to get through a couple more of their games just to understand why their offense, because I told you about this, but they've now gone 13 straight games without scoring 30 points. Yeah. Aside, and they're the only team in the area that hasn't stretched that long. Richwood's the only other team this season that hasn't reached a 30-point threshold. And again, not all schedules are created equally, but now Oak Hill's at that stretch where they're at the toughest stretch. This is the pivotal one. I think that they're probably going to make the playoffs either way, but this is the difference between the home game and maybe being a 14 to 16 seed. You have to figure out a way to score against Beckley, which has been really good, and we'll talk about that game later and the implications. And you have University, so offensively, I don't know if they have more to put together. 8 weeks in the season, you usually kind of are what you are at this point. But I do think that you have to find ways to manufacture more points.
I think with Oak Hill, it's just been amazing to me that this is almost a complete opposite of what I thought they were going to be this year. I thought they were going to have to, scrap a little bit on defense and, maybe struggle a little bit on defense and have an explosive offense. And it seems to be the exact opposite right now. Credit to their defense. I mean, their defense has kept them in the games. They've kept them in the season, and put them where they are right now. I mean, that linebacking core is pretty impressive. I mean, they're really good players. So, if they can just muster up a little bit of offense, that's seems to be the times that I've watched them is exactly what you were saying. It's just like it was just a tick off, just not quite there, and as long as they can keep putting pressure on the quarterback, I like their defensive scheme because, you see Brock running for his life a little bit. The only guy that really had some success against him was Barker, but he had those quick hits he could throw that other teams really don't have. And, I think that made a difference that night. And then, of course, you got the big running backs that make a difference. But I don't know. Oak Hill, you still watch it, you still shake your head just a little bit, and you're like, well, that – every week it goes up in the W column, and really that's all it boils down to is just winning football games.
Yeah, and it's crazy because the high variance plays. We talked about Richardson and all the talent there. I sent you the clip of it, but the first touchdown pass he threw was a tight window, 3rd and 10, slant right across the middle. Like if you're off on that even by a little, it might get intercepted, and he just nails it. And it's a 60-yard touchdown, and that's the play that you look at and you're like, wow, that's that's the peak of the talent.
You can definitely see the talent there. There's no doubt about it.
And when he's at his best, he's a top 5 AAA quarterback. You look at it, you're probably looking at that top class of Whitehair from Fairmont Senior and Hatfield from Hoover and Barker from Princeton and Richardson, depending on how things are going, is right there with the rest of them. Just that dynamic player with his legs that has a really good arm. It's just, sometimes it feels like there's just execution, like they're leaving plays out there. And again, it's hard to be saying this after a nice 21-0 win, but we do factor in the schedule a little bit and how things have dropped down. They are sitting with 1 loss at number 7 right now in projected ratings. So, again.
And this week's huge. I mean, 4 points, it's a huge game, and it's going to be a chippy game. It's going to be a huge game.
And on the other side for Bluefield, this was the other team I alluded to. They lost, and they're still number 8 because strength of schedule keeps aiding them a little bit. And offensively, it still just looks like a struggle. They don't really have any intermediate answers. It's either something short as far as the pass game goes, or they dial up those 7-man protections where you only have 3 routes going out. And it always looks like when they're taking their shots deep, there's 2 defenders there, or there's somebody over the top, and it's really hard to win that way, especially when you can't run the ball very effectively. And again, Oak Hill, defensively really good, so they're going to cause some troubles. And we talked about it last week. Oak Hill has the athletes match Bluefield, so they're going to be able to take away some of those screens, those short passes, something that you try to get your kids in space. Yeah. But I don't know if they have the ability to really do so right now. They've got to find a way, I think, to attack different areas of the field. I talked about it, but some of the big plays that Richardson hit on were over the middle.
Right.
We were able to find slants there, and they were open. And there was another big play that Carson Treadway where he hits them on a crossing route over the middle, and Bluefield just really doesn't have those same answers.
The thing about Bluefield to me though is a lot like when I started playing golf pretty seriously. You play the white tees for the longest time, then you go back and play the blue tees, and you're like, man, this is really hard, and you really struggle for a while. Then you go back and play the white tees, and you're like, okay, this is not that hard now. And Bluefield gets back into the level of double A's, with not, have teams with dominant size factors on them and speed and things like that. I think they're going to be scary. I think they'll be dangerous, because they're going to have already seen some of the most brutal competition that they could see at upper level. When they go to play in these other teams, they're going to think, well, this ain't this hard, and they're going to be really effective. So, just a thought.
Yeah, and sitting at number 8, it seems by all accounts that they control their own fate for a home playoff game. Yeah. You have Giles. You go to Giles this weekend, and that's a team that struggled, but they're also AAA points for you in the Virginia classifications. And then you end the season with James Monroe, a team that's going to provide you some points.
Right. At home.
If you're able to beat them, that's a team that provides you points. And then it seems like you're probably locked in, projected to a home playoff game from that point. It'd probably be somewhere in the 6 to 8 range if they do get it. Just kind of looking around, glancing. But yeah, that's a pretty favorable spot to be in. And like we talked about, they're probably not going to see anything in Double A like what they've seen this season as far as
But we kind of
Princeton.
thought maybe Bluefield and Independence would make the playoffs for sure, and maybe host a home game. It's just the route to get there has been really strange for both of them.
Absolutely. James Monroe at Petersburg. We found out Petersburg. We talked about this last week. We thought that they'd probably be pretty legit because they, Greenbrier West hung with them for a half and then just kind of faded off. James Monroe turned the ball over a couple times, and I think it really hurt them in this game. But now James Monroe, they're still inside the playoff hunt. But that's really tough. It's putting some pressure on this Bluefield game because James Monroe, I believe, is on the bye this week. They've already played 9. Yep. So they get some time to prepare for that Bluefield game. But it puts a lot of pressure on that Bluefield game because you don't have a lot of points right now.
Yeah, and I don't know. That's really tough. I thought they'd be able to handle that game. At least win it. I mean, not going to blow them out by any means, but I thought they would go up there and probably win that game. But really the team, and it's kind of the old adage in football. When you turn the ball over, you're going to get yourself in trouble. And the times that James Monroe's got in trouble this year, they've turned the football over. When they play, pretty clean football, they're tough to beat. And especially when you go on the road and you turn the football over, it's really deadly. And I don't know. It's going to be that Bluefield game's going to be hard. So it's a tough position to put yourself in after really kind of digging out of an early hole.
Mm-hmm. Shady Spring, I thought they picked up a quality win this week. You go to Nicholas County. This game we talked about. It's always been competitive. They go there and they win, and they're sitting in good position for a playoff game. We'll talk about their schedule, their game for next week. But this is a really big win to pick up. And if you're Nicholas County, it's tough because Nicholas County did throw a pick 6. I think it was Shady Spring threw the pick 6. They got close there to once, but. That's pretty impressive. Shady Spring, you go there, and now you really are kind of controlling your fate for the playoff. And I don't think that they can get into the realm of a home playoff game, but it's still you're looking, you're rallying, and it depends on what matchup you get. You have a shot here. So this is again a quality win.
They've really got some really good players, and they've got several different kids that can score, and they can get the ball to and run the ball. So it's good job for Shady. I mean, we thought maybe they might have a shot making the playoffs this year. Wasn't sure about it being in AAA. How that would work out. But they played really well, and who knows? I mean, that Nicholas County game's always 50-50. You never know how it's going to pan out, and always some wild ones, and that definitely was a wild one for sure. But Shady comes out on top.
I think for Nicholas, this may also cost them a home playoff game because. You have to. I think they go to Ripley this week, which is difficult.
Yeah, Ripley's pretty good.
So you needed that one, and then you get Pikeview, which they should win at the end of the season. Again, you never know. Pikeview's been competitive in some of these games, but Yeah, I think that you really needed the bonus AAA points from this
Yeah.
if you want to secure a home playoff game, and it's going to be extremely difficult, I think, to get back into that driver's seat.
Yeah, I saw Ripley earlier in the year, and they have a lot of skilled players, really good quarterback, and can run the football. So that's going to be a tough one.
Gotcha. Spring Valley at Beckley. This one, Beckley ended up replacing quarterback Matt Price with freshman Burnett after halftime. They were able to score some points, but they still lost to Spring Valley. They were introduced to Jalen Abercrombie, and I don't know if you mentioned him on the show last week. I mentioned him in the preview, but he's a Moss Award. He was a preseason Kennedy Award candidate for a reason. He had, I think, 4 touchdowns, over 200 yards receiving. And it wasn't really, from what I understand, just talking to people, that he beat them deep. It was more so on screens. They couldn't stop him on screens. And
Right.
I think it's kind of, now, I do want to throw in this disclaimer that the players that Beckley has an issue stopping on screens are really good players.
Right.
You know, Dom Collins, Daniel Jennings, like those guys are who they are for a reason.
Dangerous in
and
space.
Abercrombie, yeah, but they were just able to execute, from what I understand, get him the ball in space, and he just did everything. He's just too quick for him. AJ Thomas did get another interception, so he's up to 6 on the season. But now Beckley, I think that record's up to 1-9 after 5-1 starts now, and they do have Oak Hill this week, and they probably come into that game favored. We'll talk about that a little bit later, but it's hard. You got to stop the Rock somehow.
Yeah, it's just kind of disappointing, really. I mean, I felt like Beckley would compete better in that game than what they did. It's just we worried about the mindset, and I mean, I don't know if this has a factor in it or not, but when you do know in the back of your mind you've had those struggles at these key points of the season, and then you start struggling again. Getting over that hump's not easy, in any level of athletics. So, I just I was really surprised by the score. I thought Beckley might actually win this game. I really thought they could get through it, but now it really puts them in a tough spot because they were kind of staring a home playoff game in the face, and now it's looking a little iffy for them.
Yeah, absolutely. It's tough, and like you said, the slate to end the season just isn't easy.
Nope.
It's kind of been the same schedule over the last couple of years where the back end just really heats up for them.
Yep.
And the last one I want to talk about is Sherman at Greenbrier West. We talked about it. I was of the belief that this was probably it for Greenbrier West just based on what Sherman did. And Cavaliers came out and they showed some fight. They were able to come away and win this one extremely convincingly. Career night for Brandon Potiker. Not only did he rush for 200 yards, he made 8 tackles on defense. Really just great all-around effort. And if you're Greenbrier West, this is what you needed at this point.
Well, I think Coach Jared Robertson. I think he said it right. Last Friday was week 1 of the playoffs for him, and you don't know how your kids are going to respond to that. I mean, kids at Greenbrier West are really gritty. They're really tough, but in all fairness, they were really beat up too. They had a lot of injuries. They lost some key players. They kind of took it on the chin pretty good at Petersburg, and honestly, Sherman came in 6-1, if I believe the record was right. The only loss was Tug Valley, and that wasn't a blowout by any means. So, you felt like Sherman, was probably going to give them more than they could handle, but my boys dug deep, and I got to admit, I didn't think they was going to win.
Yeah,
so that's impressive.
Well, I was the same way. This was a week where I was wrong on a lot of things. I thought Independence would struggle to compete against Princeton, and they competed. I thought Greenbrier West would lose to Sherman, and they came in and they kicked Sherman out of their house.
Yeah.
So
exactly, they took it to them too. I mean, like you said. I guess the more shocking thing was not necessarily the victory as much as they just kind of punched them in the face really bad. So.
Absolutely. That's going to wrap up kind of recaps for Week 9. Moving on to the Week 10 previews, I do want to start with the Beckley Oak Hill one. The storyline here, obviously, Devin Richardson was a starting quarterback at Beckley last year. Now he's a starting quarterback at Oak Hill. This is big for Oak Hill. Oak Hill came in and they won this one last year, and it helped them get to the playoffs. And really, it took away any chance that Beckley had of getting into the playoffs last year when they lost this game. I think it was 21-14.
Yep.
So now you're in the situation
Critical
where
work.
Oak Hill's trying to hold on to a home playoff game. So they're gonna host Beckley on their turf. Beckley is obviously already guaranteed a playoff game, but you do want to kind of get that one back, and then there is the Richardson factor added in here. So this one could be a really interesting game.
I've been watching, 61 years old. Been watching Beckley and Oak Hill sports for a long, long time. It does not need any gasoline on the fire, and there's a lot of gasoline on this fire. So this is going to be. I honestly think this is going to be boiled down to who can keep their composure. I think it's going to be a game of high emotion. There could be some extracurricular stuff go on just from, trying to push each other's buttons a little bit. I know, Devon's probably going to want to, perform really well against Beckley. The Beckley defense is going to want to perform really well against them. So it's going to be a dandy, as they say, the old Keith Jackson line. But it's an absolute, and like you say, it's not a must-win for Beckley, but it's kind of a must-win for Beckley. And Oak Hill is huge for them, absolutely huge. They can win that game. Those 4A points, that's huge. Beckley totes a lot of points into John P. Duda Stadium Friday night.
Absolutely. And, I am curious to see, just how much the impact of Richardson practicing against those guys over the last couple of years, it kind of comes into play here. And I think he's a much different player than what he was last year. It was more so they did drop back and they threw a little bit more in the second half of the season. For the most part, they were pretty run heavy, which is different from what Oak Hill spread it out. We will factor in the run game from the spread or throw it. So I am kind of curious about that. Obviously he hasn't seen Preston Clary as a cornerback there because Preston just came out. Right. This was his first year. But he has seen those guys, A.J. Thomas, he practiced against these guys and practiced with them for years. Maybe they know his tendency. And I do think this is an interesting game to not have Landon Jones for Beckley, as we talked about, because you want a linebacker. You want to be able to do different things and make sure that he doesn't hurt you with his legs, because nobody's really been able to get to Richardson. Even when they played Princeton has this great edge rushers. They only sacked him once. He's very hard to get down. He's very elusive, very wiry. Probably a comp, probably like a Lamar Jackson type, where he's just able to consistently escape. And
yeah, he doesn't stay in the pocket too long. Mm-hmm. He seems to have that. I don't want to say he gets out of the pocket too quick, but he knows when trouble is coming and he can get out of it. And when he gets out in space, he's scary.
Yeah, if those rush lanes open up in front of him, and he's just very different. Like when he takes off, he'll take that play almost every time because he's hard to tackle in space and he's hard to tackle one-on-one.
He's fast too. Yeah, he's really fast.
Yeah, so this is again a really interesting game, and it carries a lot of weight for both teams.
And both fans being on the same side of the field should be really.
Yeah,
that should be a lot of fun.
And so that like you said, that should be a lot of fun, and that's actually the game that you'll be at. So that should be a fun one. I'd say that. Yeah. The next one I want to talk about is the game that I'll be at, and that's Westside at Shady Spring. Westside is coming off its worst loss of the season. It got thumped pretty hard against Tug Valley. We thought that Tug Valley had a chance to win this game. We didn't see it unfolding the way that it did. It surprised us a little bit. And again, Tug Valley is rated where they are in single A for a reason, which is a completely different conversation. But single A playoffs are going to be extremely competitive. Now, if you're Westside, you got to find a way to bounce back. They're still in the playoffs right now. I don't know if they drop out the loss of Shady Spring, but if you win that game, you're guaranteed a lot of points, and this should be a really good competitive game. I would liken Westside somewhat to the way that Nichols County is as far as like level of competition. I'd say they're somewhere in that same vicinity. Right. But man, there is a lot riding on this game for Westside, and obviously Shady too. But if you have any chance of getting a home playoff game, you have to win this game. Yep. And if you want to secure your spot in the playoffs, you really have to win this game as well.
Yeah. A very winnable game for both teams. It's going to be who can make the plays, if they can contain Caden, if they can hold him down. There's been a little bit of a bad feeling between these two teams too. Going back to the COVID year, I believe it was, when Westside had to forfeit a game because of, I think they beat Shady and an elder player, and they wasn't going to play each other for the longest time, this and that. So, I'm sure those things are still in the back of people's minds when those goes. I don't know how much it's in the kids' mind, but it's a huge game. Like you say, for playoff implications, because I mean, I really thought Westside would compete much better against Tug Valley. I really did. I was just kind of taken back by the magnitude of that loss. How they just really got dumped. And I mean, I know going to Naugatuck is not an easy proposition, and you're kind of behind the chains a little bit when you get down there already. But I really thought Westside had enough, to get it done. But I don't know. I mean, that's how they're going to bounce back. I mean, it's another road game, and can they bounce back against a AAA opponent and get the points they need? I think it's a must-win for them. I mean, I really do.
And I think it's a tough matchup just from a personnel standpoint too. And you look at Westside; they like throwing the ball. That's what they like to do when they run the ball. It's usually the quarterback run game. But now you're throwing it against kids like Nathan Easley and Jalen Bailey, who will intercept the ball. They will make you pay if your passes are off.
Good athletic kids, good minds.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's an extremely difficult situation if you're Westside, and I've talked about this before. You have to find ways to not be in those long situations where the defense knows what's coming. If you find yourself in 3rd and 7 or 3rd and 8, those guys, they can just sit back there and they can read it, and they will make you pay. Like I said, over the last couple of weeks, they've just been on an interception tear. He usually did a lot of it to start the season. And then I don't know if teams have just gone away from him and started targeting Bailey, but Bailey's been going on an interception tear as well.
Exactly.
But this is kind of the situation. If you're Westside, I don't know if they'll be able to get their run game going outside of Vance, but this might be the game where you have to lean on something else a little bit more, because I think Colton Lester and Kyler Kennedy are going to be the focuses of the game plan to take those two away and then make Westside beat them some other way.
And really, you get to this point in the season, and you start wondering. Look at that schedule the West Side's played, and you start to dissect it a little harder. You look at those wins, and they're like, well, those teams aren't the best. They aren't big wins. The two teams they played that are really good, they kind of got drilled both games. Just how good are they? And I think this may show it.
Mm-hmm.
This is a big game, and Shady's looking for a trip to the playoffs. They're at home. They don't want to lose this game either, so I don't know. I think it's time for Westside to kind of step up and win one that people's going to be like maybe think they're going to lose.
Yeah, it should be a lot of fun. And also from the mental standpoint, I think Westside has handled all of those losses or all of those challenges very well this year, and we documented that. When you're in those close games. Can you bounce back after a game like this? That was one thing that Westside was discredited early in the season was people were looking at their schedule, and this is why they weren't in the top 10 of power rankings throughout different parts of the year.
Right.
So this is really an opportunity to get yourself back on track and still be in that hunt for a home playoff game. Again, I think it's going to be difficult, especially when you look at some of the teams that are already kind of almost not really locked into, but going into last week, for example, Westside I think was 6-1, Bluefield was 3-3. Bluefield was still ahead of them, and Bluefield seems to be the favorite going into their final two games, whereas Westside's a little bit more of a coin flip this week.
Yep. And that is what it is. When you look at those schedules, you kind of make judgments based off of who you beat and who you lose to. And I think there's still a question mark out there as just to how good Westside is.
Absolutely. A couple other I want to run through real quick. We talked about Nicholas County Ripley already. That's a chance for Nicholas County to get AAA points and really get back on track. And if they have a chance at the home playoff game, got to win this one. It's going to be tough. Princeton at Greenbrier East. Go into that game thinking that Greenbrier East is probably a big underdog even at home with the way Princeton's been rolling. And the other two I do kind of want to hit on more extensively: Greenbrier West at Midland Trail and Meadow Bridge at Buffalo. Start with West at Trail. This is West. I think if West wins this one, you lock up the playoff berth. You get in. Yep. Obviously, not where you want to be, but you're still into the playoffs, and you get that final week of the season off because I think that's their final season.
It'd be huge for them.
Yeah,
it'd be huge for them.
AA points there. Midland Trail, I think, is pretty much out of the playoff picture entirely. But if you're Greenbrier West, this is your opportunity. You get to close it out, and you get to get a little bit healthy. Some of those guys aren't coming back. Agee, as we mentioned, he's out for the season. Yep. But you get to get a little bit healthy before you have to go on the road in round one of the playoffs if you win. So a big game there.
Yeah, Midland Trail's got a couple of AA wins too, so that helps.
Mm-hmm.
All points help at this point in the season. But it's round two for playoffs for Greenbrier West, and that's kind of the way they're looking at it. And I thought the good thing about last week was the fact that they didn't have to run Evan Vandal 40 times again. And, let's be serious. I mean, any kid that, I know the kid's tough, but 40 carries, 40, that weighs on you after a while. And, the fact that he really didn't have to put that kind of effort out in that game, I think bodes well for Greenbrier West going to Hico.
Absolutely. And Meadowbridge at Buffalo. Buffalo struggled this year, but those are AA points. If you win it, they beat Montcalm. That was a close game. I don't want to say you lock up a playoff berth if you win this game, because they're still kind of in that back end where it could fluctuate a little bit. I think they're somewhere in the 12 to 13 range right now.
Right.
But you go in there and you win, you come away with those AA points, you're setting yourself up for a lot of success to lock up that playoff berth. And, obviously, I would imagine, you talked about it, Coach Reichert sent you the rushing record stats before the season. I would imagine that they do want to get Caden as close to that mark as possible.
Yep.
And this is probably an opportunity to do so. He would need, I think the record was around 2,500 yards, so you're looking at maybe 800 or so. And let's be real, 300, 400 yards isn't out of the question for him.
No, I kind of laughed and joked with him a little bit. I was like, not to say that you didn't have a great game, but these 300, 400-yard games are kind of becoming routine for him. And, I just don't, I think Adam hit it on the head. You just don't realize how fast that kid is and how big he had a couple kids Friday night, and I'm like, oh, scared me.
So he reminds me a little bit of like a Derrick Henry type, where he's like a legitimate 6'3". Like he's a big running
kid.
back. Yeah, and he's built like he has a body of if you wanted to play him at college, I don't know if he's fast enough or not, but like if you're if he wants to play college football, there's probably a position for him somewhere. I don't know if it's like as some team might like him as a tight end or something like that. But he has the measurables.
He wants to play at the next level. But the thing that's hard about him is when you don't understand just how fast he is the angles. You run an angle to try to to tackle a kid, and some of those poor safeties from Montcalm. I mean, he was so far past them by the time they got near him that they had no chance to tackle him. So the kid's fast. He's elusive. He's strong, and it's going to be a nightmare for Buffalo.
Yeah,
they think the Bison are tough. Look out, here comes some Sims.
Absolutely. And the teams that are off this week, Independence, James Monroe, Mount View. But we're going to go ahead and get into our Player of the Weeks. For the South, the Week 9 Player of the Week is Brandon Potiker from Greenbrier West. And for the Kanawha Valley, the Week 9 Player of the Week is Dane Hatfield from Herbert Hoover. Hatfield, I think, rushed for over 300 yards.
He had a stupid day.
Yeah, and he set the career rushing yards record at Herbert Hoover, which is pretty impressive for a quarterback. And he's not just a rushing quarterback; he throws the ball really well too. But for our area, Brandon Potiker, we were both on the same page with this. The level of performance, and there were a lot of good performances this week. A lot of meaningful performances. Talk about Peyton Mounts and what he did for Pikeview, and he was a community choice winner. But Potiker, just in that spot, you had to have it. Your playoff hopes hinged on that, and he came through. He could have had an extra touchdown, but he stepped out of bounds to get an offensive lineman a touchdown. Very classy move, and talked about it. It wasn't just the 200 yards on offense, but also the 8 tackles, which led the team on defense.
Yeah. And I think that's as big a key as his defensive effort, because he has to step up for them. I mean, they've lost 2 key defensive players on that side, and he was kind of that third wheel. Not level-wise, but there was a trio of them that were really good. And, him stepping up there was really impressive. But, like I talked about earlier, him factoring in that kind of yardage, and they could give him the ball that much and not have to run Evan as much as they ran him is huge for them. And, I know he wasn't maybe the running back of choice to start the year, but, once Isaac Agee went down, I kind of felt like he had this game in him somewhere. And, you couldn't ask for a bigger time. I think they lose that game throughout the playoffs. So, they have to have that game. So as much as some of these other performances were so impressive, what was on the line for West and the way he performed under pressure on both sides of the ball, I just thought it was a no-brainer, really.
Yeah, and we were both in agreement. And, that's going with some of probably the second kid I probably may have went with would have either been Sims or probably Richardson, who Richardson put together a really good complete game, both as a rusher and a passer. But it just
shows you how tough it is to win the award. I mean, you have great games like that, and it's just hard to win.
Mm-hmm. And talk about it, who you do it against, and the spot that you do it. Like last week with Jennings, like it mattered there. It's kind of the same way I say, if you throw an interception in the first quarter, people probably don't think about it as much. But if you're down 4 points in the fourth quarter with 2 minutes to go, and you throw an interception at the 30. Like, that is a high leverage point. And this was a high leverage point game for Greenbrier West. This was make it, break it, and when you step up when the lights are the brightest and it means more, it matters.
And when he stepped out of bounds on that run too, that was a big run. I mean, it was a long run, and just kind of have the awareness of to appreciate your line like that. I was really impressed by that.
Absolutely. Obviously, sectional volleyball starts this week. The AAA one's kind of the one that we have a lot of eyes on. You're going out to that one here in a little bit. A lot of quality there. We talked about it in this same region alone. Herbert Hoover, Greenbrier East, and Shady are all on it. Section's going to come down to Greenbrier East and Shady.
2, 3, and 4 in the States.
Yeah, it's really interesting.
Yeah.
So we'll have that. AAA is the one. Greenbrier West comes into sectional play as the #1 team in the coaches poll, and then I think James Monroe was down to 5 or 6 in AA or so.
I think it was 5. Yeah, which AA is just so brutal.
Yeah, we talked about. That's the class you don't want to be in. And Beckley, I think,
really
is a 3 in Quad A. Yeah, so it's being at 5 isn't so much an indictment as it is like just a reflection.
How tough it is.
Yeah, because I mean we're talking about it. Those teams, the top teams in AA, could probably win AAA too.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, obviously we have that coming up, and the big thing this week is soccer regionals are on Tuesday. Try to have this episode out before they kick off at 5. But Beckley hosts GW. They beat them once earlier this year, 2-0. And then afterwards, it's Greenbrier East and GW on the girls' side.
Yep.
I just kind of want to hit on Beckley real quick. I covered their 2 sectional games last week. I thought the corner kicks, they went 1 of 8, and I think that it's kind of more so a thing. They've been really good on corner kicks this year. You've documented that quite a lot. Like that's kind of been just like a bread and butter thing for them to get to those set pieces. But they were 1 of 8 against Oak Hill. And they mitigated that really well against Greenbrier East. I think they went 1 of 4. Their second one they scored on, and just kind of rode the momentum from there. But the thing is, everybody knows now, like that. You're 20 games in. As Dave Larraba, Steve's the head coach, his dad said, everyone kind of knows. Like when you're the top 3 team throughout the state and you're going on the kind of tear that they are, they know. And nobody probably knows that more than GW does, because I think that they got burned on corner kicks when they last played them. Yep. So that should be a really interesting matchup. And Beckley has I've always appreciated this honesty from Steve Larraba. He's always just been refreshing, and at the point, this has been GW's section, and it's been their region, not their section, for the last decade plus, and this is their opportunity. And some of these Woodrow kids, like I don't think that they care. They're younger sometimes. They're too young to know. Kobe Dillon's only a junior. Allie Fargley is a sophomore, and those kids are dynamic. So this should be a really interesting game. Obviously, the loser goes home. Winner gets to come back to Paul Klein next week and play in the state tournament.
Yeah, I like the statement you made in the story. It's the kind of the postseason boogeyman, and that's kind of what GW has been. I mean, there's been some times that I thought, maybe they definitely had a better team than Woodrow, but Woodrow had a good game plan and almost got over that hump. And now you kind of feel like that Woodrow is the better team. Can they carry that through in this game? But that they definitely are confident. You're correct. I mean, they've played quite a high level of soccer all year. They played against high level teams. I think they fully believe they can win. But if there's any sport in the postseason that's kooky, it's soccer. Because I've seen nights where guys are just blistering the post and hitting the crossbar, and balls just won't go in, and then you get some kid knock one in from 40 yards that barely crawls under the crossbar. So it's a crazy time. But I think I don't know if it's crucial that Woodrow gets an early lead, but I think it would be big for them if they can get an early lead.
The thing too with GW, and I go back to the regional final against Greenbrier East 2 years ago. You can't let your foot off the gas.
No,
I think Greenbrier East led like 3-1 or 4-1 in that game, and had to win the game on penalty kicks. Correct? Yeah. So
it had to have a huge save in overtime. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's they are the postseason boogeyman for a reason. Like
it should be fun. Both games should be really good. I mean, I think Greenbrier East has a really good shot at beating GW. GW had to beat Nitro in PKs, and of course Nitro was really good too. But both games should be really good. We can make first time we get both our section teams in the state tournament. Man, for a while.
And then, Saturday you had the chance to cover AA sectional championship between Pikeview and Shady. Shady kind of went into that one favored, but Pikeview's had kind of the dominance in the sectional and the championship round. Really, it's a tough pill for Shady to swallow because we felt like they were probably on. Last year they were in the situation where they felt they were good enough to beat Charleston Catholic. They just came up a goal short.
Yep.
And then again this year you feel like, okay, we have the confidence. We played some tough teams. They played Beckley pretty well, and then you fall short in the sectional. That it's really tough for Shady to swallow.
Yeah, it is tough, and the thing that kind of caught me maybe a little off guard. I don't think I quite realized just how good Pikeview is. I know where Shady had beat them early in the year. You kind of felt like Shady had the upper hand. And then the tie they had not too long back, 0-0, was kind of a cold, rough night. But, honestly, as good as Shady was, Pikeview took it to them. I mean, they kind of controlled that game physically. And, Shady just didn't have much of a response for that. And, that's going to be kind of the issue with Pikeview is how's the game going to be called? Because they had seven yellows, 2 reds. Now the reds weren't all physicality, but that's they had a numerous amount of fouls, and it seemed to me every time Shady would kind of move on a breakaway or kind of be able to try to advance the ball that there was a foul, and they slowed them down, and then Shady had to play more in kind of a set against a set defense, and just really had no answers that night. It was strange to watch.
Absolutely. So congratulations to Pikeview.
They can beat Charleston Catholic. Now, talk about the postseason boogeyman. I mean, definitely Charleston Catholic.
Yeah.
No doubt about that because they got a bunch of state titles and things like that. But the Pikeview lost to them 1-0 earlier in the year, and it was on an own goal with like 10 minutes to go. So it's going to be a physical game. Pikeview's going to take it to them. Just going to be a matter of how a game's called.
Absolutely. You have any final thoughts before we wrap this thing up?
No, it's kind of that time of year where the postseason's just going wild, and you work 6 days a week, and try to find your brain on Sunday.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's it's a lot of fun. Well, that's going to wrap things up for our producer, editor, Austin Sims. I'm going to give him a shout out. Forgot to do so last week, and then obviously for my co-host Rusty Udy, I'm Tyler Jackson. Appreciate you guys watching the Lootpress Sports Lowdown. We'll see you next week.